Hi, these are some notes over the blood. What is it? What is it made out of? You should have a handout that goes along with these notes. So, first off, blood is the only fluid tissue in the body, which makes it unique, and it is technically a connective tissue. It is made of both living and non living components. We call the living cells, just in general, we call them formed elements. And then the non living matrix or components of your blood is called the plasma. And the blood functions in transporting nutrients, waste, and body heat around the body. So, some physical characteristics of blood include its color, right? Blood is not blue, it is always red due to the hemoglobin found in it. But if it's oxygen rich, it's going to be kind of a brighter red. And if it's lower in oxygen, it's going to be more of a dull red. pH of your blood is always going to be in a very carefully contained set range of 7.35 to 7.45. And your blood temperature is slightly higher than your body temperature. All right, we are going to focus on our blood component. So if you take blood and you put it in a test tube and you spin it around in a centrifuge, you're going to see the heavier components sink down to the bottom and the lighter components, right, less dense, floats to the top. So down here, you'll see that, about half, less than half, about 44% of your blood is made of red blood cells or erythrocytes. About 1% in the middle is made of your white blood cells or leukocytes and your platelets. Sometimes this is called the buffy coat. And more than half of your blood is plasma, 55%. And for sure, these are percentages you have to memorize. So know these for sure. Let's talk about plasma first. So plasma is the part of your blood that is not living material. It is 90% water and 10% materials that are dissolved within it. So it could be things like gases, right? Like oxygen, carbon dioxide, other gases, salts, minerals, nutrients. A lot more about that coming in, nutrition class. Enzymes, hormones, right? Hormones travel through your body, involved in long distance signaling, waste products, and lots of different kinds of proteins. There are some proteins that you find a lot of in the blood plasma, like albumin, which is involved in transporting materials. It's a large protein. Fibrinogen, which is involved in clotting, and globulins, which are an example of antibodies. All right, when we look at formed elements, that's the solid components of the blood, right? It's the cellular part. So we're going to look at each of these individually coming up next. We'll start with erythrocytes, right? Erythro means red. These are red blood cells, and their function is carrying oxygen. They use hemoglobin to help do that. So a little bit more on hemoglobin coming up. You need to know what their shape is. So they are generally pretty round and flat, but they kind of come inward in the middle. So they kind of have a concave shape on both sides. So we call that a biconcave disc. Red blood cells, when they're mature, they don't have any nuclei, which kind of aids in the fact that they're pretty short-lived cells, and they contain very few organelles. Their whole structure is optimized for carrying oxygen. You guys are going to do a practice activity about hematocrit, which literally means blood fraction. What does that mean in real words? It's what percentage of somebody's blood is red blood cells by volume. It's a way to measure if somebody might be anemic. Right? We'll look at some cell counts later on as well. So more about hemoglobin. It's a specialized protein in your blood, specifically in your red blood cells. It has iron in it, and it binds to oxygen. Each hemoglobin molecule can bind to 4 oxygen molecules, and each red blood cell contains 250 million of these molecules. Leukocytes, right? Leuko means white. They're white blood cells, and these help defend your body against pathogens. These are complete cells, just like red blood cells. Platelets are not complete cells. We'll see that next. white blood cells do have a nuclei and they have lots of organelles. One really cool thing about them, I think, is that they can crawl around. So if you've ever seen an amoeba moving, or you can look it up online, your white blood cells move around like that too. They can crawl. They can crawl in and out of your blood vessels and through your tissues. And they respond, well, we'll look a little bit closely at different types, but they respond to chemicals released by damaged tissues and other sort of cell communication. So now we're going to look at the 5 kinds of leukocytes, and they're divided into 2 categories. So 3 of your leukocytes are what are called granulocytes. And they are called granulocytes because they look like they have granules, or kind of think of like sand or dots inside their cytoplasm. So these 3 are going to be what's called granulocytes. And then the other 2 are agranulocytes because they don't have those granules inside their cytoplasm. All right, so we're going to look at neutrophils first. These are the most common or the most prevalent in your body of the white blood cells. What do they look like? They have a nucleus that has multiple lobes. So this sort of purplish structure is the nucleus, and they have lots of fine granules in their cytoplasm. These guys act as phagocytes, right? They eat. Phago means to eat. So they can eat or engulf foreign material where you might have an infection to get rid of and break down those bacteria or other things that may be making you sick or could make you sick. You're going to see these are active during short-term or kind of acute infections. So if you take someone's blood and you do a blood count, a complete blood count, and you see their neutrophils are up, it might be because they're fighting off a short-term infection, right? And because they might have even more if they have a active infection. All right, eosinophils are probably my favorite. Their nuclei have 2 lobes, kind of look like a sad barbell over there. And then their granules in their cytoplasm look bright red. These guys are involved in, kind of historically parasites. So if you get a parasite, these help kill them off. But nowadays, we don't really have a lot of parasites anymore in our culture here in our country. So they tend to do more with allergic response or allergies. Basophils, this is the last of the granulocytes. And these granules, they look pretty big, right? They contain a substance called histamine. And this is kind of involved in the inflammatory response. So think about what happens when you get inflammation. Your tissue gets red, it gets hot, it swells, you get a lot of blood in that area. So histamines dilate blood vessels, right? So you can get a lot more leukocytes and other materials that are going to be needed to help an infection or whatever's going on in that area. So they initiate inflammation, they dilate blood vessels, right, which brings more blood, and that's why they kind of feel sore. If you get inflamed, you might feel a little bit of pain. It's red, it's tender, might be warm. All right, the last 2 are agranulocytes. The first one is called lymphocytes, and they are found in your lymphatic system, your lymphatic tissue. So lymphocytes, lymphatic tissue. These are very large. The nucleus is very large inside these cells. They do play a role in the immune response because these are the type of cells that are going to be either T cells or B cells. So more about that throughout our Year Academy experience. B cells are what make your antibodies. And then our last leukocyte, this is monocytes. So they have a sort of kidney-shaped nucleus. They're very large, and they act as macrophages when they leave the blood. So they'll leave the blood, go into the tissues, and start eating things, right? Engulfing material that doesn't belong there, macrophage. And these guys, right, if you have high monocyte numbers in your blood, it might be because maybe you're fighting off a chronic infection. Right, there's one other type of formed element, and that is the thrombocytes, right, of the platelets. These do not have a nuclei. They're actually just fragments of cells. So they're very small, but they are what is responsible for hemostasis, which is your blood clotting. So that is everything about the major cells and your plasma, right? All the components of your blood. And we will continue to study more about the blood over the next few days. Thank you.